Good morning, everyone. My name is Gil Carnero. I am a director at Simplify Solutions. And today we're going to be going over the predictive model in SAC. Going to go through some of the functionality, how to set one up, how to send data to private versions, as well as then creating new models and setting up a multi-action to write data to whatever forecast you wish. So the first thing I wanted to do here is show you the basic model that we had set up for this. It's a very simple data foundation. We have version, account, date, and these two generic dimensions that are organization and product. So if I look at these, it's just basically organization is just a region in the world, and product are what the products are in this model. So the idea is to use this simple model to run predictive on and write a forecast to these two lines, right? So I have everything in my forecast is ready, and I want to have SAC run its predictive model for product sales and service sales, and then populate this forecast here for me. Okay, so let's go on and set one up. The predictive scenarios that come within SAC are these three: classification, regression, and time series forecast. This time series forecast is the only one that uses an underlying model for it. These other two use data sets. So for us today, we're going to be focusing on this time series that uses that model that I just showed you there to create a predictive forecast using the actuals data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new one here. Call it new. I'm going to leave it in my files. And when you open it up here, you can see I have no predictive models, right? What I need to do is first connect it to that data source, which is that predictive model that I showed you earlier, which is this one. And then when I do that, it populates some settings that you have to fill out. The first thing it asks you is what target are you going to be running this predictive model on? And my target is here, right? It's going to be measures is in this model, it's using natural FX logic to populate this USD measure. And then it's using these accounts. So what I'm going to do one of these accounts at a time. So here I'm going to pick my measures, which is just a local currency, right? Not that USD. The FX will automatically calculate that USD for us. And I'm going to pick my account. Now, I'm doing one account at a time, right? And this is a base level account, the bottom level account in this dimension. But as you can see, you can select totals, you can select parents, and it'll run the predictive model at the parent level. So I'm going to select product sales here. And then it asks you to fill out some other information. Now, the date is not the actual dates you're going to use. It's whatever date dimension you're going to use that is currently in that model, which we only have one. We're going to pick that date dimension. Models in SAC can have more than one date dimension. This one that we're using only has one, so I'm going to pick that one. And how far out we're going to forecast. I have Q1 info here. I want to forecast out to the end of the year. So, that's the one I already have ready. I'm going to pick up 9 here. Forecast periods. And then the next thing it asks me to pick up is what entity am I going to use? Now, entity is not saying a specific dimension. It is whatever dimensions and properties I have in the model that aren't account dimensions, that aren't date dimensions, that aren't versions, right? So when I showed you that the model before, it had these two dimensions, organization and product, and those dimensions have properties themselves. We could select only those, but for right now, I want to select everything in that organization and everything in that product dimension for it to forecast out on. The next thing I could do is I could go ahead and filter for one of these if I wanted to. So I could say, okay, only run this forecast for North America, only run it for South America, etc. But I'm going to run it for everything, so I'm not going to add a filter. The next section in this setting up of this predictive model is what am I going to use to train the forecast. You can select all observations, so I'm using actual data, right? I set that up here in the version. You can use other versions if I wanted to, but I'm using actual data. And I'm going to use all the observations that we have for actuals. So depending on the models you're using, how much data you have, you can just, narrow this down to only a window, or you can leave it at all. And this will be used until whatever date you wish. I'm just going to use it to whatever last observation I have in the system, right? Because I think in this system, I only have data for Q1, so I want to forecast out everything past that. So I'm going to leave it there. This last setting here is, do I want to convert negative forecast values to 0? Which means any account that you're forecasting, if it goes negative, I just wanted to forecast 0. I don't want to forecast negative sales, right? So I could turn this on and it'll cap that at 0. I'm going to leave it off to see what happens, to see if we have some forecasted negative sales numbers. And then the final piece in this initial setting is influencers. And I could add influencer is an account and measure that exists in the model that'll help us with the predictive. Going forward, I will, after we do a couple of these models, we'll go back and add an influencer and I'll show you what it does and what it looks like. So if I were to click train and forecast here, what it's going to do is it's going to train this model for me. I already have one ready, right? So I'm going to go to this one. That's already trained because it takes like a minute or so. And these are all the selections that we had made before without the influencers. And I train this model and it gives me these 3 tabs with some information that you're looking for. Before it writes any data into the system, it's going to give you all this information. The big thing it gives you here is the expected MAPE, which is the mean average percent error. So the lower, the better for this expected MAPE score. And right now, sitting at 6 for the overall is pretty good. Oops, sorry about that. You can see here, if I go up to the top in the overview section, it gives you an expected MAPE per entity that I selected. So organization is the first one, and then product is the second one. So obviously here, these are my top ones, and then these are my bottom entries that it's showing me here. Some of these might have a smaller data set, or it might be other issues on why these MAPE scores are so large. And then we could go into each of these and see what's happening. In this first tab, the other thing that it gives me also is it lists out all the entities it's writing and the record count for each, and it gives out all of them instead of just the top 20. So what you can do is, select one. I'm going to select, say, France, Venus, And when you do that, it automatically moves you to the second tab. And the second tab gives you further information. Gives you, again, the MAPE score for the organization of the product that you selected. You could also change them here if you wish. And then it gives you this graphical look at what the forecast is going to look like based on the predictive model here, right? So what it's showing is this line is all the actual data that it's seeing for that combination, and it's plotting out a forecast going all the way back to the beginning, right? So this line here is the forecasted, the predictive forecast, and then it gives you a max and a min for the 9 periods that are beyond the forecast, right? So it just plots out based on the actual data what the trend is, and then it gives you what the forecast is going to be and a projected max and min for that. Also, it goes through each month it's forecasting, and it gives you a breakdown of what it's using to create that predictive forecast. In this case, it's using trend, right? And when we go back and add an influencer, it will change some of this stuff. Right now, if it sees something that's influencing, if it sees any cyclicality in the data, it'll add it here and show you what percentage of it it's using for what. But right now, for this prediction, it's only using the trend. And then at the bottom here, it gives you the it gives you what the forecast is going to be for each month, the actual value it will write into the system, and then it gives you that max and the min if you want to write those values as well into the system. You can, but for right now, we're not going to do that. Other pieces it gives you is if it sees any outliers in the past, it will show you what that outlier is also in the future. So let's go see if we got any of these that have any outliers. I believe we did in some of the other ones I was looking at. So, oh, yeah, here you go. Mercury has a couple outliers, right? And you can see what it's doing with the data here. The data kind of smooths out in the end of the period, so it's giving you this smooth forecast here. And then it does show you what the outliers of the past are. So that's this tab here. And then the final tab it gives you after you train a predictive forecast is it gives you an explanation for this, right? Just a different look, a little bit of what it gives you in that forecast tab. This explanation breaks it down a little bit more. And here it gives you the algorithms it's running, right? For this predictive forecast, it's running a trend. It's running a cyclical algorithm. If it finds any, it will plot that in an orange line. It didn't. If we had any influencers that were affecting this, it would plot those in green. We haven't set up any influencers. Our influencer is empty here, so it's giving us nothing. And then it'll give you fluctuations here with purple. So again, like we saw before, it's mostly using the trend data to plot this forecast. And then the final is just saying, okay, 75% of it is using the trend, and then 24 is just residual value. Like it's just using the rest of that, those algorithms to create that forecast. It's telling you here that it follows a linear trend over time. It does not see any cycles. So if when you train the forecast, if it sees any of that cyclicality, it'll give you a little explanation here. It's like, okay, we see this cyclicality happening. This one does not have anything. And then it gives you fluctuations, if anything, and target statistics. Okay. So again, you can see these explanations for any of the entities that are given here, right? So I could go here and click this one and see what it says. It's got an outlier here. It's using trend. This is what it's going to plot in the forecast. You know, same data for each entity. So now what we want to do is get that data over here. I do have a tab here that's going to capture the predictive for the product sales here by organization. So what we want to do is we want to, once it's trained, what we want to do is save it to the forecast. And if you're running this predictive model this way, you need to have a private version in your model for it to write data to. If we're going to, once we create a multi-action, you no longer need a private version. It'll save data to a public version. But for here, it requires a private version to exist in your model. So this predictive here, and I can show you what that means. What that means is I created a private version called predictive that only I can see in this model. So this is that I could play around with, right? So I'm going to write data to it and only I could see it. Only when I publish it to a version, I could publish it to a version that already exists, or I could publish it to a new version. That's when everybody else that has access to this model will be able to see the data. So for now, I'm going to leave it private, and I'm going to, it gives you a couple of options when you're going to save this data. So do I want to save it plots all those past values, right? Do I want to save those into the system of the predictive? I could click that on. I'm going to leave that off. I just want it to plot out the 9 months that I'm asking for. And then here is those max and min intervals. I could write those too as well if I chose to. And then those would also need their own private versions to write to. If I choose that, I'm going to say no. So I'm just going to save it to this predictive forecast version, only the 9 periods. And when I do, you can see that it starts working here. Okay, and then once it says applied, I could come in here to my story and see the data populated. It does take a minute, and then obviously you could run into some errors here. The errors at this stage are pretty good. It tells you like what to look at to fix. But once you set up a predictive scenario correctly, it should apply no problem. And when it's applying all that data that we saw. So now it's done. I should be able to come here to this model and refresh it. And my data populates in. And any level that we told it to, right? And we told it to bring at organization and at product level, you can see here, I have some filters here for the product. Let's say I only wanted the first person star games to show up. I apply selections, and then it gives me just those. I could also add that dimension into the rows here, right? But for now, this one is just a filter. Same thing works for this. I only want to see North America. And there you go. Okay, so now we got one of these accounts done. What I could do is I could go to that version management, right, and publish this data. I could hit publish this data to that forecast version, and it'll show up in this other report, and it'll be done because this is a different version than the predictive that I have on these other tabs. But I'm going to show you another way to populate that later. So for now, we'll leave that unpopulated. So now we have this product sales done. What we need to do is we need this service sales account to run. So we got to create another predictive scenario for that. Once you create one, once you create a model here. I wish they had named it something else, because model here and model over there. But once you create a model, you can just easily duplicate this. You don't have to start from scratch every time. And now I have this model based on predictive model 1. And I have everything kind of pre-filled out here. And the only thing I'm really going to change is the account that it's going to write to. So I'm going to select service sales instead of product sales, leave everything else the same, and I'm going to train that one. And again, this takes a little bit. So once it's done training, all those tabs that we had before showing us all that information for the product sales piece, it'll give it to us now for the service sales piece. And then once that is done, and I can write it here, I'm going to publish it to this predictive, and you'll see the data pop up here. Yeah, it takes a little bit. That's why I had the other one ready before. So after this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, because all this stuff here I'm doing is done through the predictive scenario modeler. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a multi-action, right? So once you have these predictive models built, what you can do is set them up to run whenever you want, right? So you can see how you do that is you set it up through a normal data action function, and then you set a multi-action to come run that predictive scenario and write it to whatever version you're writing it to. And what we do at our client is they have a specific version that they use for predictive that they don't touch, right? That version is only for predictive, and then you can make copies off of that and manually adjust your numbers if you wish. Yeah, leave that one alone. That one is the predictive that the system writes, right? So here you go. This one is trained now. For the service, you can see that the MAPE score is a little worse than the product sales. Now, after we do this piece, I'm going to add an influencer in to try to bring this number down a little bit, right, to make it a little bit better. But again, you could go through all of these entities that it created and see all the data that it's giving for, the forecast and for the max min, what it's using, what the forecast is going to be, outliers, explanations, all that stuff. Those are always going to be here in the predictive model piece, right? So it's trained, and now I'm going to write this data to the same predictive. And then that data will come up here in this template once it is applied. The applying piece does usually come a little quicker than the training piece. So that is good. And again, it's going to write all of these combinations for us. Okay, applied. Now I could go back to my story, and this is the service sales piece that we just wrote. And here comes all the data in. So that's good. So now we have these both sitting in the predictive version, right? I could publish those to the forecast version, but let's do it another way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a button here, and that button is going to bring in the predictive models, and it's going to write to this forecast version here. So the first thing I got to do now is this is create a multi-action. Okay. And here, when you create these multi-actions, right, you can select a data action, you could select a predictive step, you can select version management, all this stuff that gives you with these multi-actions. What I'm going to do is add those predictive models that I created into this multi-action here. So I'm going to say, okay, predictive scenario is going to be this guy. Now, the predictive scenario is the main scenario, right? It has the two models. It has one, model one is that product sales, and model two is going to be that service. And then in this case here, right, it's going to save it to a version that I select here. These now, see, it only gives you public versions. So where before, if you're running it manually in the predictive scenario, you have to create a private version. Here, it's going to give you a public. So I'm going to select that forecast. And then I'm going to add the second step, which is going to be that predictive scenario. It's going to be model 2 for the service accounts. I'm going to write it to forecast as well. And again, here, right, it gives you those two same selections. I could write it to the past periods, and I could have those prediction intervals, which I'm not going to do. I'm just going to leave it here. I'm going to name these so that when we look at the end result and we're looking in our job monitor, if we wanted to do that, it'll tell you which piece either had issues or which piece is running. This is service. Okay, and I'm going to save this. I'm going to save it in my folder. Oops, where is my predictive folder? There it is. Save this, name it. New multi-action is fine. Okay. So now in my story here, in this story that has forecast and is blank, it has product sales and service sales here. I'm going to add that data trigger for the multi-action. Put it here. And I'm going to select that, and it's going to say run predictive scenarios. Okay. Save that. And then if I were looking at this report here from the view side, I could go to where I added it, and I'm going to run that multi-action. And what it's doing in the background is it should be running those scenarios, right? And we could go into the job monitor here and see exactly what it's doing. So here's my multi-action. So it's going to tell us when that first step is done here and when that second step is done. And then we could also add publish. You can publish the data into the version if you wish. Right now I didn't publish anything. I didn't add anything. I'm just running those predictives, and it's going to write to this forecast version. And this piece takes a little bit. Okay, you can hit this. You can hit this run in the background, and then when it's done running, it'll give you a little pop-up and tell you when those predictives were done running. But we have the job monitor here as well. And then if I go to the predictive scenario itself, and I refresh this, you see now it's training it. So first it trains it and then it applies it. So that time that it took, it does it again here because obviously this is a new scenario. So it wrote that one. It took 1:42 to do it. Now it's doing the second one, and then it should write down to here for us. And yeah. All right, let's go to the next thing. We could probably start working on the next piece as this is training. So like you typically will have a calendar task that has this multi-action run, obviously when you're not sitting here watching it. And typically when you're not sitting here watching it, it runs a lot quicker. So let's wait for it to finish because I do need to wait for it to run before I create the new scenario. What I'm going to do after this is we're going to go back, double back, and add an influencer to the second model and see what it does, and see if it helps with the MAPE score. So from our experience at our client, some accounts, right, get helped by adding those influencers and some don't. So what you could do is you start monitoring them and seeing what's happening with this median MAPE score. And if the influencers aren't really adding anything, you can just go ahead and remove them, right? Okay, so now it's done running, ran successfully, and it wrote all of our data here to this for our forecast version. And if I go back and compare it to what I had in the predictive from before, it should be the same, right? But now it's in that forecast version. And if I go to the forecast in the front, we have that data populated now. So those are the two ways to run predictive scenarios. One is to run them manually and set them up. And then the other one is to create that multi-action. Again, private version, public version, all that kind of stuff we could get into if we're setting one of these up for your company. The last thing I wanted to show is that influencer piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this one. And I am going to leave it as service sales, leave everything else the same, right? And I'm going to add an influencer at the bottom. And for this influencer, I'm going to use product sales. Now, typically, when you add the influencer to this, right, it still uses the actual version for service, but for the influencer, it would like you to use the values going forward as well. So those values that it had previously created in a version that you're looking at. So you have to play with the versions a little bit to be able to use these influencers correctly. But I'm going to show you what it does anyway, just using it without those future values. So here, I'm going to train this one. And our MAPE score, we'll see what happens here in this model, but our MAPE score should be different than not having any influencers at all. This will show an influencer count. Well, now we have one, right? And it'll give you a record count. Same, you could add multiple influencers here if you choose. These influencers have to have some connection to the account that you're predicting, right? Because if they have nothing to do with it, and the values are all up and down, nothing to do with the one you're writing to, it's not really going to help you that much. Yeah, and these influencers can be anything that exists in your model, any account measure combination that you want. Okay, it takes like a minute to do that. Don't need the Java monitor anymore. And now this is basically a new, totally new model using an influencer. The numbers that it forecasts should be different than our other one. Okay, so here you can see that the expected went down, so that's good using that one influencer, right? But it gave us some warnings. So I could go and see what these warnings are all about. When you click on a entity combination that has a warning, you'll see what the warning is here. Yeah. Like I said before, so it has no future values, right? So it's telling you that for an influencer to work properly, you would like to have those future values as well, meaning these 9 months that I'm forecasting out should be there. But what you could see here now in the forecast breakdown is it is using that influencer to change your forecast. It's affecting your forecast a little bit. So in this one by that much, right? So if we go back, or if we go to the explanation, I should be able to get, yeah, see, there's that influencer plotted out. And now the trend is affected less. It should affect the trend less. And it should give you an impact for that new influencer that you put in there. See here, it gives you the impact of numerical influencers. And if we had multiple, you could go in here and filter for all those guys. We only have the one, obviously. But you can see how it gives you more data. It gives you a little explanation of what's happening. It helps out your overall projected error a little bit by adding those influencers. But like I said, sometimes it doesn't, right? And those that don't have any impact by the influencers, you can go back and remove them from your models pretty easily. So from our experience at our client, it's hit or miss. Some are impacted, some aren't. It's just playing with it. And even month to month, right? You could see if something changes, if your data changes, you might want to add an influencer or take one away to smooth out your forecasts. As far as these other errors here, they're probably going to all be the same as the main error, which means because when we know we don't have those future values out there. Yeah, so future values missing. But see, it does look like it is using that member to influence your forecasted time series component for these entities. So that is a good thing. So that's pretty much all I wanted to cover with these predictive models. Again, they're pretty easy to set up, right? Once you have a data set model here, and you have accounts that have a good set of data, you could run this time series predictive scenario on any of them, and you will get all this information, and then be able to start populating some forecasts for this. Like I said, this is the typical piece that we have in our client here. Is they have the predictive scenario writing to its own version, leave it there, and then they could use it to copy it to another version and have manual overrides, that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much all I had. I don't know, Corinne, do we have time for, I guess we have time for questions. If anybody has anything, you could put it in the chat here. Otherwise, that's all I had.
Great, thanks, Gil. If anybody has a question, go ahead, pop it up in the chat in the right-hand corner of your screen. If not, we'll be posting this recording to our on-demand channel for you guys to view it. But oh, looks like we have a question.
Link to Compass models, the ability to pull in the min-max values using Compass simulation. So yeah, I mean, once you create the scenario and you create the min-max, the only thing you have to do with this is it won't allow you to write, obviously, the min-max to the same version you're writing your forecasted value for. You just have to create new versions for those, and then you write those in, and then, yeah, from there you can export it to whatever you need. Good question. Yeah, like here when you save these, yeah, you'd have to have more versions available, right? And this one I only created the one for the predictive, so I'd have like predictive min, predictive max, and I'll write those values there, and then you have all three of those versions populating with data, and from there you can do whatever you need with it.
Gil, you have another question in the chat.
Oh, where is, okay, question. Yes, yeah, Abdul. Yeah, so how you use those influencers correctly is, right, because what I did here, right, for this one is I'm forecasting service sales, right, and I'm using this product sales. So what I want to do to really use this influencer correctly is I want to plot this version, right? So I'm going to have this run. I'm going to have this run in a model here, send it to a version, plot all those values, right? And then use that version to run this model. Right now, I don't have that functionality happening, right? Because I'm just using actuals for everything. But what I would want to do is I would want to have this secondary model that's using the influencer use a version that has all the data prior populated for the account that I'm predicting, plus all the data, including the future values for the influencer that I'm using. Then you won't get those warnings. That's what you need to do. So to get that going totally correctly is a multi-step process, right? Which I didn't have the time to do it today, but you can definitely do it and set that up. But you can see, even using just the one influencer without those future values, right? It's still getting affected by the influencer. It's just, it's not like this MAPE score. If we had those future values, the MAPE score would go down even a little further, probably. I hope that answers that question. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you basically need a version of historical data, incorporate the impact and the influencers. Exactly.